Hi guys, welcome back to the Cozy Corner. A while ago I did a video where I reacted to 1-star reviews of some of my favourite books of all time, and it made me think, would I be so biased if I reacted to 1-star reviews on books that I didn't necessarily enjoy or I actually ended up DNFing. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to react to 1-star reviews on books that I DNF'd or didn't really enjoy. And to start with, I'm going to start with George Orwell's 1984. And I know this is such a popular book and I so desperately wanted to like it, but I did end up DNFing it. But it is a book that I am going to give another chance for another upcoming video, which may or may not already be up depending on what order I upload these videos in. So somebody has said, I honestly cannot articulate how much I hate this novel, but it seems Orwell was also terrible articulating his ideas, and he probably wouldn't have thought mine held any value because I'm a woman. I'm not gonna lie, reading that comment is not making me want to pick this book up again. But I mean, I'm gonna give it another go anyway. So somebody else said, I'm pretty sure I burnt this book. I think burning books should be illegal. It feels like it should be illegal anyway. I don't recommend it. I really don't. Because it's basically just burning money then, isn't it? And somebody else just said, just ew. That's the whole comment. Just ew. I don't know if those comments have made me less interested in picking 1984 up again. I definitely won't be burning the book, and I'm hoping that I will be able to finish the book this time and not DNF that, but we'll see about that one. The next book that I also ended up DNFing was Dracula by Bram Stoker. I just could not get into it, I really couldn't, and it looks like there are lots of other people who couldn't get into it either, so I don't feel quite as bad for DNFing such a popular classic. This one person said, this whole story could have been avoided if Jonathan had been more open to local knowledge. Seriously, if you're travelling in a foreign country and getting a lot of alarmed negative responses from the locals about your travel plans, just change them. It's quite logical. I mean, Bram Stoker probably wouldn't have been such a well-known name if he had decided to take this person's advice and just got Jonathan to turn around on his horse and trot back to where he came from. But I do like the logic behind this person's thinking. This next person said, Dracula is my first experience reading a classic book, and now I know that cult books are just not my vibe. I didn't necessarily see it as a cult book. I guess it depends what your definition of cult is, really, isn't it? And then this other person has just put, I finished it, I'm finally free. Like I said before, if we don't enjoy a book, let's just put it down and pick up something else we're going to enjoy. Animal Farm by George Orwell. I did finish Animal Farm by George Orwell and I rated it 3 stars, so all the books on this list are either DNFs or 3 stars and below rated by myself. Yeah, the only thing I can say is that I was glad it was short. I do agree on that. I liked George Orwell's style of writing. I found it easy to read, as in everything flowed. I didn't really enjoy the themes that George Orwell writes about, but please, if you have any other George Orwell favourites that aren't Animal Farm or 1984, let me know in the comments and I will give them a go, because Maybe I'm just not picking up the right George Orwell book. This other person said this book was super boring. The word comrade was used 90 times. I counted. I'm glad that some people do have enough free time to count certain words as they read. I wish I had that much free time on my hands, I'm not going to lie. And then this next person has said, I hate this book. Please don't kill me. I mean, I don't think anybody should be harmed for their opinions on books. The next book was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I so badly wanted to thoroughly love this book, and it took me so long to read. This is a very short book. It's something ridiculous, like 120 pages, give or take. It took me 3 months to read. Yeah. And I totally agree with this person. I don't know whether it's because I had high expectations of this book, but I was severely disappointed. Yeah. I think that was probably my issue as well. I went into the book with such high expectations because everybody I spoke to about it was raving about it and absolutely loved it, and I think maybe my expectations were too high. I ended up giving it 3 stars, but I just found that nothing extraordinary took place. It didn't move at a fast enough pace. I feel F. Scott Fitzgerald could have made it even shorter. There was a lot of standing around at parties and a lot of getting drunk, and they weren't essential to the main plot. But yeah, it's just my personal opinion. This book is pointless. Nothing happens in the entire book. The characters just talk, drink, and cheat on each other. I would have rather gotten root canal than read this book. Wow. That is quite a statement. I would definitely rather reread the book than get root canal. Yeah. That person enjoyed that book a lot less than I did, clearly. Next up, we have Stephen King's Gwendy's Button Box. I gave this 2.5 stars. I didn't really understand the idea behind this storyline. It was just a little bit odd. Let's have a look what people said about it. This is one of the strangest books by Stephen King, and that is really saying something. And then another person simply just asked, Stephen King has actually put his name to this? I feel that's a little bit savage. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. I did read it. I did read it quite quickly. It did flow, as in the style of writing was quite easy to read. I just didn't quite get the concept we were going for with the storyline. Another book is A Painted House by John Grisham. This is a book that I got out of the library to read, and I didn't finish it. I soft DNF'd it. It wasn't terrible that I did not want to finish it, but somebody else had reserved it at the library, so I did have to give it back. I couldn't extend it, and I just haven't picked it up again. So yeah, it may be a book that I will come back around to. I got about halfway, so yeah, it may be a book that I pick up again from the library just to finish it. As I say, I didn't dislike it enough not to finish it, but I just didn't like it enough to put my name back on the waiting list to this other person had read it. Somebody has said this was such a horrible book, it had potential, and I kept thinking the story would come around, but once I got 2/3 of the way through the book, I knew there was no room left for the story. Yeah, it was, I think it was a little bit slow. Not very much happened. It did have so much potential because in the first part of the book there's an event that happens, and I thought John Grisham would really grab onto that part of the storyline, but he just doesn't. And I think this book could have been so much better if that event had been a bit more of a focal point in the book. As I said, I can't really give too much of an opinion on it because I didn't fully finish reading it, but it does sound like that, unfortunately, that storyline probably wasn't picked up again, but who knows, I will find out someday. And then this other person said John Grisham should stick to writing legal thrillers. I think that's a valid point. I love John Grisham. I think he is a very talented writer, especially when he's writing about legal stuff, when his characters are lawyers and criminals. He's also quite talented when he's writing non-fiction as well. So I think just maybe, I think every author has a book that is not their masterpiece. It's kind of like, as Bob Ross would say, a happy little accident. And I think maybe A Painted House is John Grisham's happy little accident. The next book on my list is The Body by Stephen King. The Body is the book that the movie Stand By Me is based on. So I read the book and then I watched the movie. The conclusion I had for both was very, very similar, that nothing really happened until the end. It wasn't, again, this is something that I rated 3 stars. It wasn't dreadful, but I also wouldn't read it again. Somebody has said this book took me so long to finish, it was not as interesting as I was expecting, and I think that's pretty valid actually. I was also, being a Stephen King book, I was expecting it to have more of a storyline than it actually had. As I said, the storyline didn't actually come into play until quite near the end of the book, but it is probably one of the best endings I've read in a Stephen King book, but unfortunately the beginning and the middle just don't back up the ending. I know this is supposed to be a poignant coming of age story, but it wasn't for me. The whole thing felt very pointless. One thing I would say is that Stephen King knows how to write about the weather in a very nostalgic way. Yes, I agree. Stephen King has a way of describing things as mundane as the weather and making it sound incredibly poetic and beautiful. He is very, very good at describing things. So the last book on my list is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Moby Dick was very much not up my street. In fact, he was not even in my postcode. I wanted to read this because, I'm not going to lie, I wanted to read this because at the end of the film Matilda reads this, and I think the opening line is just so famous, "Call me Ishmael," and I so badly wanted to like this book. I did end up DNFing it halfway through, and this is probably the only book that I've ever got to the point where I'm like, well, that's 10.5 hours of my life that I'm not going to get back. So yes, I did DNF it halfway through. This is probably my most solid DNF of I just know I'm never going to pick this book up again. And it does have quite a lot of mixed reviews, and I think it is to do with the length of the book, because it is a absolute beast. So this poor person has said, life is too short to be reading this nonsense. Life is short. Life is very short. But if you're a fan of Moby Dick, then read it, because you have to fill your short life with things that make you happy. And then this other person has said, dear Lord, where do I begin? I tried, I really did, but it's the most dense, incomprehensive, narcolepsy-inducing book that I have ever had the displeasure of picking up. There are descriptions that go on for pages at a time. Now I'm just going to use the pretty hardcover copy as I decorate my bookshelf. Well, at least this person has found a positive, that they've bought a very pretty covered version of this book, and it's going to look really good on the bookshelf. Yes, there were descriptions that went on for pages and pages, but yeah. Again, a bit like George Orwell, if you have any other recommendations of Herman Melville that you think would be worth me taking a look at reading, please let me know in the comments. Preferably not the length of Moby Dick, and preferably not about harpooning whales. But if that's what you're into, that's fine. So yes, thank you guys again for joining me for this video, and I will see you again soon. Have a great time reading, and I really hope you're enjoying the books you're reading a lot more than these people enjoyed these books. See you later. Bye.